Now, I have been an architect, one way or t'other, all my life. And you have some funny commissions. People buy old houses and don't know how to upkeep them, and that is where I come in. They ask me to come and I help as best I can. But that was a strange commission. A man had bought a great house in the north of the country, it was, miles from here. And I arrived to see a great Tudor mansion on which had been built all kinds of Jacobean extensions and a Georgian front. Oh, it was quite a mess. But he had a dream, and he showed me the plans. It was quite spectacular. Well, the next day I was going around finding the false walls and the ones he could move and the ones that he couldn't. And that occupied me for 2 days. But as I was measuring out the house, I realized there was something missing. There must be a false wall, for the internal measurements and the external did not match up. But it was done so well, it was not immediately obvious. It wasn't until I took exact measurements of all the rooms, one by one, locating those rooms in reference to outside, that I realized it was in the chief drawing room that the discrepancy was. There must be a wall, a false wall, too early. And as I looked at the ceiling, I noticed that the central rose was slightly out of sync with the carpet. Not by very much, perhaps a foot. And the roof was so high, you barely noticed. But that was what gave me the clue, because that told me which end the false room was likely to be. And I went and I knocked on the wall, and I got out a little sharp instrument, a knife I think it was, and I pushed it in through the old wallpaper that had been put up in the Victorian age. And I discovered to my excitement the wall was made of plaster and lath. And soon I put a little hole in, not too much, because in case my friend really minded, about the kind a mouse might make that could be easily mended. And then I shone a light down, using a lantern, a bullseye lantern. And I saw something remarkable. There seemed to be marble glinting back at me. The kind of marble that, in the Georgian time, they had to make fireplaces with. You know the kind. Can be ugly, but can be beautiful. Well, I called my friend, and he said, "Now that be odd. What do you think is there?" Well, I went out, and something else had been bothering me. We had one chimney pot too many. I always count the chimney pots. It's useful to gauge the size of the house. And then I matched them with the fires to get some sort of idea about how the walls all work. And it was true. There was one chimney pot too many. And it was a big chimney at that. And when I pointed it out to him, he said, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, "I think that under this false wall, there's a fireplace. But why it would have been covered in plaster and lath, I do not know, for this room would have been cold in olden times." "Be quite cold now," he said. "I'm going to open that fireplace, and if we can have a fire, I shall be so happy." Now, my friend takes action before counsel. And so, straight away, he called his gardener, and the gardener called the mate, and they got their crowbars, and we had to cover the room in plaster. The room was going to be covered in plaster, so we laid out great sheets. And the two set to work. By mid-afternoon, they came to us at tea and said, "Well, we're nearly done, but there's something very, very strange, sir." And we went in. And there was a great hole, and beyond it we saw a fireplace. And on that fireplace there was a crest of 3 crows. And my friend said, well, that goes with what I know about this house. It was built by the Crowbournes. They lived here for 5 generations, but the last one disappeared under odd circumstance. That was their crest. 3 raven heads. They wanted to be called the Ravenborns, but Crowbournes they were by nature. And I said, well, congratulations. That is a Baroque masterpiece, that fireplace. I have seldom seen anything so beautiful. And it was true. The fireplace was lovely. And I turned to them and said, well, what's your trouble? And they said, but when we opened it, there was a smell, a horrible smell, like mutton fat, like something that shouldn't have been was roasted in that fireplace. And the dark seemed to fall down it like soot. And I said, well, it was just soot, and fireplaces are musty. Come, we will help you. And we helped them clear the fireplace then, dumping the plaster and lathe there in the garden, dumping it in the garden. And as we did, we revealed the most immense fireplace I think I'd ever seen. And we looked up and we saw the light come down. But as I did that, I got a funny feeling in the back of my neck. But I didn't say it. Now for the next 2 days, every so often, particularly when it was dark, you would smell it. A smell like mutton fat, like the memory of something that was. But we were full of our grand designs. One day we were sitting down to a late dinner, and when suddenly we heard, coming from the kitchen, a loud crash, as of the banging of many saucepans dropped at once. And then there was a scream, and we heard a voice that was the cook saying, what are you doing, Nellie? No, Nellie was the kitchen maid, an unsteady girl. So we went in, and Nellie was staring at the larder, saying, it's there! It's there! I saw it! It's there! But we sat her down, and I gave her whiskey, and she had never had it before, so that was quite amusing. And then she said, it was strange, it must have been a dream, but I saw it! Black face, white eyes, staring as if it was burned! Oh well. We asked the cook, who was of a sober disposition, and she said, there was nothing there, nothing at all, just that smell that you say comes from the fireplace that I wish wouldn't. And we apologized, we said, well, that's all right, the fireplace would be swept, and no doubt, when we did that, we would find out whatever made the smell. And when I went back to the supper table with my friend, I suggested that we didn't just sweep it, we rebuilt the top. So we had builders commissioned to come in 2 days' time. The next evening, I was just taking a final set of measurements of the fireplace. I'm a careful architect. I hope you have realised that. And I thought to myself, let us not make a mistake with anything quite as wonderful as this. And I had just turned my back to the fireplace and the sun had set, when overpowering that mutton smell filled the room. I almost gagged, and I thought to myself, just as well we're changing that fire. We're just going to have a look at that chimney. There's something up there. And as he thought that, I saw there was something coming down, or rather something standing in the dark of the fireplace. In that profound dark you get in those fireplaces that go up to the sky after the sun has set. There was a black form, and I went towards it, and then it turned to me. A black face it seemed, but its eyes opened, staring white, and in a cracked voice it muttered, I am home within. And it reached out a hand, or what could have been a hand, burnt and blackened. Well, I ran from the room. More than that, I had my friend lock it until the morning. I said there might be something valuable in the fireplace. Well, the next day, we had a priest with us. And when we took the fireplace apart, and do you know what we found? A secret room, halfway up, bigger than a bread oven. and in it, of course, there was a body, wearing the clothes of some 80 years before. A man then in old evening dress, face black, and no eyelids, for they had been burnt off. And on his suit, the crest of the Crowbourne. Well, the priest, when we saw it, was not as shocked as I thought he ought to be, and he said, "Well, we've found him at last. The old people say he was here." "What?" "Well, how their fathers and their grandfathers rose up against the last of the Crowbournes, who was a man of uncertain tastes, and would not leave the children of the village quite alone. And one day they broke into his house, and what they said they did, they were never told. The children were never told, but they darkly muttered about the smell, and how the fireplace had to be covered. And now we know why. And we will lay him in the tomb of his fathers, and may his soul find peace." And so that was what we did. We took the bones and we laid it in the family tomb with full ceremony. And from that day, the house was free of that smell. But what other sad memories stayed there, I do not know. I never returned. I don't think I ever would.